What's happening, everybody? Welcome to another episode here at the Side Guys Football Forum. Running this episode solo, just once more again, while Tad is sort of healing up with all the back issues that he's going through. Wishing him all the best in his recovery. And yeah, I hope to have him back on the podcast soon once again. In case you haven't been tuning into our last episodes, we've been going into all of our position rankings. So we did quarterbacks a handful of episodes ago. And more recently, we did our running backs episode, giving you an idea as far as how to address the position when it comes to fantasy football. With all drafts sort of happening this week, over Labor Day weekend. I know some people draft, the week of the college with the NFL season starting next week. Some people do it that week as well. You kind of want to do it as close as you can to the start of the season to avoid any sort of 3-game suspension by wide receiver Demarcus Robinson for substance abuse. You got obviously Rashee Rice and his whole off the field issues. So looking at a possible, 6-game suspension there to start the season, possibly. You obviously got the Joe Mixon injury news, which I brought up in the last episode, over the backfield there. So, there's a lot of things that sort of happen over the course of the offseason, leading into training camp, leading into preseason. So, lots of things change as far as injuries, off the field issues, whatever it is. Suspensions come down, injuries sort of keep players out. They get put on the IR list while they trim the roster down. All this stuff happens. And so, yeah, the closer you get your draft to the actual start of the NFL season is all the better. And so, yeah, we want to make sure that we get you all the information that we can before you have your drafts, this weekend, this week, before next week as well, to give you as much ammunition to head into your draft with the most information, to be the most prepared to escape with the best roster possible to get yourself a fantasy title this year and hopefully stay in competition all season long and in future years as well. So make sure you're tuning in to our podcast, our YouTube videos. Just anything and everything. Make sure you're supporting us, so we're always giving you the best information, even personalized to your draft specifically, to give you hyper personalized information to make sure that your draft, whatever specific modifications are done to your league, or just whatever specific league settings or trades or whatever it is, we're giving you personalized advice for your respective league. So let's jump into episode. We talked about it. We did quarterbacks in a previous episode. We most recently did running backs, but now let's discuss the wide receiver position. So we're going to go into, a bust at the position. We'll go to a sleeper position, and we'll close it out with a bold prediction at the position as well. So if you're a fan of the podcast, you know that I am a diehard 49ers fan. Got the hat right now, sort of showing it off there. But there's a lot of talk, especially when the 49ers drafted Ricky Pearsall in the first round a couple years ago, that either Brandon Ayuk or Deebo Samuel may be on the way out. And in this case, in this past offseason, Deebo Samuel was shipped out to the Washington Commanders. And now most people will look at this as like a sort of a chance to sort of, revitalize his career there and sort of get a fresh start. Play with an up-and-coming offense that was just in the NFC title game, losing to the eventual Super Bowl champion Philadelphia Eagles. But I think just it makes sense as to why they decided to move on from Deebo Samuel, because I'm labeling him as a fantasy bust this year. So the Niners shipped him off to the Washington Commanders for a 2025 5th-round pick. During his time in San Francisco, Niners fans loved him. This guy was an absolute fit in this offense. He was very dynamic as a playmaker, not just as a receiver, but they actually used him as a ball carrier a lot of the time as well. So he was very dominant with the ball in his hands to get, those tough yards as a runner as well as a pass catcher. But I think a lot of people started to realize, outside of a 2021 season, which I'll get to there in just a second here, is that Deebo Samuel, I think, fit more as a great player for the 49ers, but not necessarily for your fantasy roster. So let's jump to that 2021 season. He absolutely exploded onto the scene. He finished as a wide receiver 3 in PPR leagues and just was absolutely dominant that year. But for some reason, he's had up and down years since then. He's had up and down years before that. And, 2023, he did finish as a wide receiver 15 in PPR leagues. The Niners offense looked very good that year, made it all to a Super Bowl, unfortunately lost it there. And he looked to return to, a form as far as like a low end wide receiver one. I think just the biggest thing though is that in those 2 seasons, he averaged 15 or more fantasy points per game, and he's only done that, twice in his career, and that was in 2021 where he averaged 21.2 fantasy points per game. Like I said, very dominant player in fantasy leagues at the wide receiver position. And in 2023, he averaged 16.2 fantasy points per game. So still a very solid season, though. But I think the biggest thing as to why the Niners decided to move off of him is that they acquired Christian McCaffrey, so it sort of eliminated the need for having a player of his caliber running the ball. They needed more of a solid wide receiver, which Samuel was good at, but I don't think he was like a clear cut, like solid, like pure wide receiver that could fit in this offense. I think he sort of needed that sort of little bit of a hybrid role that you could get the most use out of him. And so injuries though, and some illnesses. I think Samuel missed a couple of games last season. He produced a less than average season for San Francisco. I mean, I know San Francisco suffered from a lot of injuries last year, both sides of the ball. But even when Samuel was healthy, I know a lot of Niners fans, including myself, were complaining for the fact that just like he was dropping the ball quite a bit and just very inconsistent last season. So I'm not quite sure what was going on in his head last year. Maybe it was like, some, post effect of like injuries or illnesses or whatever it is, but just like he just wasn't looking like his same self, and he wasn't the dominant player that I think Niner fans were used to seeing. And that's even outside of just being a fantasy player. I think, obviously Niners fans want their team to succeed, and just to see Samuel be a big piece of this offense and a focal point and really just, be a consistent weapon. I think that's just the biggest thing, a consistent weapon, especially for a young quarterback and Brock Purdy, to sort of give him a consistent weapon on the outside. Just we weren't seeing that in the times that he was getting thrown the ball. Just there were some, concentration drops or, just easy drops that, you just think that this guy can normally pull it in based on his track record, but just you weren't seeing it. And so I think the Niners decided that it's like, you know what, let's go with Brandon Ayuk, stick with him, go with the young guy and Ricky Pearsall, the emergence of Jauan Jennings, which we'll get to a little bit later in the episode. I think just a change of scenery could be a good situation for Deebo Samuel. Called up the old friend Adam Peters with the Washington Commanders, and they shipped off Deebo Samuel to Washington. And, you look at this and be like, change of scenery could be good. A good boost for Samuel's stock. Seems more likely, though, I think he's on the decline in his career as a fantasy player. So I think he'll fit well in this offensive scheme, with what Cliff Kingsbury was doing with Jayden Daniels last season. I think, calling the plays, he'll be very good. But I think just the days of him being a premium option at the wide receiver position in fantasy leagues, I think are gone. Like, I mean, there's a good chance that, his first year, he could have sort of bounced back here. So it's like, in a redraft league, he could be a target option, but I think it's more of a bench situation as opposed to a starting option with Deebo Samuel. I think, there may be some off weeks where he goes off, but there's nothing that he will sustain to make him a viable every week starter, except for possibly deeper leagues. And I think in fantasy football, especially in redraft leagues, you need that consistency of a player that you can depend on week over week, to give you consistent production each and every time there's a matchup that you have, that you can rely on this guy to get you at least double digit fantasy points. I don't know if that's going to be the case with Deebo Samuel anymore. Like, I mean, we'll see. Maybe he's going to land in Washington, just be an absolute fit, and be a solid veteran option opposite Terry McLaurin, and Ja'Cory, Krosky, Moret, all that stuff, Bill, whatever they want to call him, Jayden Daniels, obviously, and Cliff Kingsbury's offense seems to sort of really click last year. Maybe that continues this year, but I really just don't know. And I think for me, it's just I've seen too much over the past couple of years where it just sort of worries me as far as, can I trust this guy week over week? And it's just, I don't know if I could do that anymore with Deebo Samuel, even in a new situation. So I think for me, I'm labeling as a bust as far as just, I just don't trust what he could produce there week over week in every matchup that I have this year. So labeling him as a bust, unfortunately, but I'm going to stick to Going from a former San Francisco 49er to a current one, a guy that I sort of mentioned earlier as to why they decided to eventually ship off Deebo Samuel and why they were considering trading him or Brandon Ayuk in the first place, and that is Ricky Pearsall of the San Francisco 49ers. I consider him as a sleeper this year, and I think it's purely for the fact, I got more reasons behind this, but just like purely for the fact that the Niners wide receiver room is dealing with a litany of injuries. Like, I mean, there's so many people that are hurt right now. It seems like there's a lot of chance that most of these guys are going to be good to go by week one, but it still worries me a lot. That's like, we're still have that uncertainty. I know we still have some time before week one rolls around, but week one is next week. So it's like we don't have a ton of time to sort of sit here and be like, okay, yeah, we can trust this guy. Okay, we trust this guy. I'm not just quite sure there. But yeah, I think with Ricky Pearsall, he's been the one that's been the most healthy this whole offseason. He's been building up some chemistry with Brock Purdy. He's been looking good in the preseason, the limited action that he's seen. So, I mean, just you look at the changes on this roster and you can sort of see that, they're sort of shifting in a different direction. Obviously, brought up the fact that Samuel was traded. Brandon Ayuk is looking to hopefully return to the starting lineup by week 6 after dealing with the injury towards the middle parts of last season. So hopefully he'll be good to go, but he'll need some time ramping up. So in his place, you obviously got Ricky Pearsall, but you also got Jauan Jennings. Now, you look at Jauan Jennings, enjoyed a bit of a breakout season with all the injuries that sort of were happening, the inconsistencies for Deebo. And he stepped in, he's able to fill in the void. He put together a season with 975 receiving yards off of 77 receptions, and he scored 6 touchdowns. All of these were, of course, career highs. You look at that, and he sort of now entered the offseason requesting a new contract during the beginning parts of training camp, and has also been dealing with injuries during training camp as well. So it's looking like he should be good to go by week 1. But I think this just really opened the door for Pearsall to come in and just build a relationship with Brock Purdy, as mentioned, take advantage of the time on the field, just be able to put in the work and train and learn the system, firsthand as opposed to viewing it from the sidelines, and just really become a core part of this offense, especially with them shipping off Deebo Samuel. He sort of has to step up and fill that sort of empty hole left by Samuel in this offense and become a producing player of that wide receiver group for this passing offense. Looking at last year, he played in 11 games, put together a stat line of 31 receptions, 400 receiving yards, and 3 touchdowns. This includes closing the season with averaging 7 receptions, 105 receiving yards, and 1 touchdown in his final 2 games. So that was a stat line he's averaging across both games. So very impressive numbers to close out the season. You like to see that hope that he can sort of carry that over into the next season, because you have to look at the fact that it's like they drafted Pearsall in the first round. And I think there's just a lot of just unfortunate things that happen. You look at his last preseason where he was unfortunately shot, and then he came to the season a little bit behind. He sort of had to ramp up, learning the system. Kyle Shanahan's offense is not an easy thing to learn. So just be able to soak as much up as he can, sort of finish the season strong, I think gives me good hope that I think heading into this year, he'll be a focal point of the offense, the passing game, I should say specifically, but then also I think you just know that he could develop further and become a very good producer in this offense. And so, yeah, having a full offseason to sort of train up, having the preseason to sort of play in a little bit. You also have to look at the fact, like I said, I brought this up at the very beginning of the segment here, is that with everybody else being hurt, Pearsall by default gets so many more of the targets. Like, I mean, I think this is a guy that's just going to get force fed the ball to move the ball down the field. It's going to be him. I expect Kittle to have a lot of, touches in this offense as far as being a receiver. They brought in Luke Farrell to sort of run some more 12 personnel. So it's like they'll keep him in to block and let Kittle run out on some routes. So it's like I expect this offense to really flow through both those guys as far as the passing offense is concerned. Obviously, sprinkle in some Christian McCaffrey out of the backfield, but just like, yeah, I think because of the, addition by subtraction situation in the wide receiver room, Pearsall, I think, has a very good opportunity to step up, take advantage of the volume that he's going to receive in the passing game, and really become a key producer in the 49ers passing attack. So this is purely, talking, about my good friend Tad. He always likes to mention that's like, if you're looking at offense, you can look at wide receivers, the one stat line that he likes to rely on is the volume. So it's like, is he going to get a lot of targets? Is he getting a lot of targets? I think in this upcoming season, Pearsall, once again, obviously, we wish this upon every player, but as long as they can stay healthy through the entire season, Pearsall looks to be a guy that could take a massive leap in his second year in the league and really become a key producer in this 49ers passing attack and the offense overall. So Big sleeper for me, Ricky Pearsall. I think you grab this guy in the mid round and really benefit with possible wide receiver one type numbers for sure. Low end for sure, but definitely wide receiver two numbers. But yeah, I think he's got that potential to finish wide receiver one territory because of all the volume that he's going to get in this offense. So that's my bust. That is my sleeper. Let us get to the hot take bold prediction section here at the wide receiver position. And this is a guy I'm definitely getting all the shares that I can across all my fantasy leagues, almost regardless of what type of fantasy league that you play in. The only one that I'll sort of shy away from is maybe a standard league, but even that, I expect his touchdown numbers to sort of increase based on what we saw last year. But yeah, I really expect him to be a big, dominant piece in this offense, especially in PPR leagues and half PPR leagues. Just really just expect this guy's production to absolutely overwhelm this year. Really big second year breakout for this guy, and that is Ladd McConkey. I think he'll finish as a top three fantasy wide receiver this year. So you look at Ladd McConkey, over in his 2024 NFL draft, draft profiles, they kind of want to lay it out there. I don't think anybody denied the guy had a lot of skills. I mean, just he was a superior route runner, had natural hands. I mean, coming out of Georgia, I think this was a very guy that sort of was relied on to convert a lot of crucial plays, crucial downs, excuse me. So, I mean, just this is a guy that I think with everything was going right for him, he could be a very good player at the wide receiver position in the NFL. Major red flag on him, which is usually the case with a lot of draft prospects, is just he dealt with a lot of injuries during his time at Georgia. He dealt with knee tendonitis, he had back injuries, he had ankle injuries, he also had shoulder injuries as well. So I mean, just like it was all over the place. But I think the nice thing that you can sort of look at is like none of them were serious and they're all over his body. So it's like it wasn't like a consistent, like, seeing Jonathan Brooks last year, where it's like he was dealing with the ACL injury, then he re-injured it. So it's like that's a lot more worrisome as far as can he get his career back on track? Re-suffering the same ACL 2 years in a row. It's like, is that something to be cause for concern? With this, it's like there's so many other injuries that he's dealing with across all over parts of his body that's just like if nothing was serious, that's like I think he was able to get past that. And so as you look at that, and he was able to prove a lot of people wrong because he played in all games but one last season, which is an absolute beast for the Chargers passing attack. He finished with 82 receptions, 1,149 receiving yards, and 7 touchdowns, which came out to an average of about 5 receptions and 71 receiving yards per game in 16 games played last season. Heading into year two, I think McConkey just automatically becomes that number one option in this offense, a key target, and I think just absolutely, like I said, build on that stellar debut that he had last season. And you also look at the fact that it's just like, kind of similar to what I was talking about with Ricky Pearsall. It's like he was the guy that I think could be trusted the most in that wide receiver room for the Chargers. And the same thing here in San Francisco, where I'm saying with like Ricky Pearsall is going to get a lot of volume as to why that I like him a lot in fantasy football. So it's look at the wide receiver room. Last year, he was playing with fellow rookie Quentin Johnston. Second year guy Quentin Johnston. You had Joshua Palmer, who's a veteran, but just hadn't seen a lot of action. DJ Chark was a veteran. Darius Davis was a young guy. Jalen Rager was a young guy. I mean, I'm actually kind of upset Taz not here because that's like a TCU wide receiver room there with the Los Angeles Chargers right now. I don't know what's going on over there. But just like you look at that wide receiver room, it's just like there's a lot of guys that you can rely on consistently in that passing offense. Very few veterans, but even that is just like how much can they really contribute to McConkey's growth in the league. But you look at this offseason. The Chargers decided to move on from Keenan Allen after 1 year. They're obviously going forward with their rookie Luther Burden that they drafted. They have Roma Dunze. They have the veteran DJ Moore that they gave an extension to. So they're going with that triple as far as their wide receiver room. So Keenan Allen is now reunited with the Los Angeles Chargers. And I think this is a big reason as to why I like Ladd McConkey to take a big step in his second year. Because, you look at the fact that, Allen is a veteran in this league. He's a veteran started with the Chargers. He's played with Justin Herbert before. I know he doesn't have too much familiarity with Jim Harbaugh and Greg Roman as far as their offense is concerned, but I think, just having played in the league formerly, seeing Jim Harbaugh leading the Niners a handful of years ago, obviously, goes over 10 years ago now. It's like, man, crazy. But just like, he knows that what to do to be a very big piece of the passing offense and to be a premier receiver in the NFL. Maybe his career is not where it is anymore. Like, I mean, he can still be a solid producer, but maybe he's not the Keenan Allen of old. Maybe it's past his prime. But I think all that knowledge, I think, can be passed on to McConkey to really just get a big leg up on everybody else in that wide receiver room. I think the whole wide receiver room will benefit from this. It's very similar to when Richard Sherman left the Seattle Seahawks and signed with the San Francisco 49ers. I think a lot of people view they just didn't have the skills anymore, but the knowledge, I think, was the bigger thing that was able to build that secondary, which was able to lead San Francisco to that Super Bowl back in 2019. And so it's like, I think it's a very similar situation here where it's like Keenan Allen will still be a piece of the passing offense, but I think it's really just the reins have been passed to Ladd McConkey and the rest of the guys. So just like this is a situation where it's just like you add him into that group to give the knowledge to McConkey to really just, get him the best situation to, grow, flourish. I mean, whatever sort of adjectives you want to add in there, but it's like he's really going to benefit the most with the addition of Keenan Allen. But you also have to look at the fact that it's just like you add a good piece to that wide receiver core that I think people defenses will have to worry about as far as drawing attention away from McConkey. Because I mean, like I said, Keenan Allen's still a good wide receiver in this league, so I think he's gonna be able to navigate the defense and be able to find situations where it's like he's gonna be able to free himself up. And it's like as defenses start to close in on Allen a little bit more, that frees up Ladd McConkey a lot more to really give him a lot more targets and just become that much more dangerous in this passing offense. And so while Jim Harbaugh, Greg Roman, they operate a run-first offense, I think McConkey should just still see a healthy amount of targets this season. He had 112 last season, which led the Chargers. And just I think just you look at just everything as far as how it lines up with McConkey and this offense. And like I said, just the addition of Keenan Allen, I think that's just there's too many things that are working in the favor of Ladd McConkey to really have a breakout season. So yeah, top three, like I said, maybe I was a little bit hesitant to say he'll finish his top one, but as the top wide receiver, but I think he has a good chance to do that as well. The biggest thing for me is just he's got to increase that touchdown total. He had 7 last year, but it's like I'd like to see if he can get to double digits. I think very much it's in play that he can finish as a wide receiver one, but top three for sure. I think he's got a very good shot at that. I don't think there's anything that's sort of working against him. Unfortunately, as I said, obviously Ricky Pearsall, the health thing is the biggest thing we want to wish on all these players. So it's like as long as he can stay healthy for the full 17 game schedule, or even just the 16 that he played last year, it's like that is the big key for him to sort of have the success is that if he's healthy, he's going to be a dominant piece of that passing offense. I think the Chargers fans are going to be happy. And as a fantasy manager, if you're able to acquire Ladd McConkey onto your roster, I think you're really going to reap the benefits that is Ladd McConkey on your fantasy roster. Like I said, just I'm trying to get every share of his that I can across all my fantasy leagues I'm playing in this year because I really just have that much promise and that much optimism surrounding Ladd McConkey to really just break out this year. So maybe that's a worst kept secret, especially if you're playing in a league with me this year. But yeah, I'm not afraid to admit it. But just, yeah, he's a guy that I'm targeting in all of my leagues, though, for sure. That'll close out the episode. Like I said, quick and sweet here. Unfortunately, without Tad, so it goes a little bit faster here. But yeah, I appreciate everybody who's sort of tuning in. Like I said, we've been dropping all of our position rankings on our social media handles. So make sure you're following us on all our social media handles. You see the ticker down below. You got us on Twitter. You got me at UpTheSide23. You got Tad at TadSide94. Got the show handle at The Decide Guys. And of course on Instagram at The Decide Guys as well. So that is where you can see all of our position rankings for all the positions. I think we've done up to tight end so far. So it's like we still got kicker and defense that we're going to post up pretty soon. But yeah, that is the best way you can sort of build your draft strategy there. So it's like, in between the episodes, like that's a great way to sort of like I said, understand your strategy, understand how you want to attack those certain positions, because you have to remember that my rankings are based off of pre-draft rankings as to where you should possibly be drafting guys, and Tad's rankings are based on where he thinks they will finish at the end of the season. So it's like if you work with both of them together, that should sort of give you an idea as far as how you want to attack the draft, how you want to attack the waiver wire, how you want to attack the trade deadline, and really build your championship roster to help you win some titles this year. So that's a good way to sort of do that. Also, a good way to win your league is to definitely, interact with us. We'd love to hear your thoughts as far as like, you're drafting at the fifth position in a 10-man league, 10-person league, excuse me. What should you do? Hit us up. We'd love to give your thoughts there. It's like if you're playing in one of these creative leagues, like a guillotine league, or you're playing in a vampire league or something else, and you need personalized advice, the best way to sort of get in touch with us is on those social media handles. Interact with us. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love to give you personalized advice for your specific draft to get you in the best position to win your fantasy title. So make sure you're doing that. Make sure you subscribe to your podcast, where you listen to your podcast. Make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel so we're always up to date with our YouTube videos as well. And please, guys, we say this every episode, but we totally mean it. Please support our parent network at LAFB Network, because without them, there would be no us. They're giving you a lot of great content because we just had recently the trim to the final 54-man roster. So we had a lot of players that were released. So we got your coverage there from the Rams and Chargers perspective as far as why they let some guys go, what their final 53-man roster projection looks like. Did they make right moves? Did they make wrong moves? Who are guys that they could claim off of waivers as well? And I think the big thing with the NFL season happening next week is going to be here sooner than you think. They're getting you ready for all that week one action with some previews and what to expect in that week one matchup and the rest of the season as well. So they got you covered the Rams and the Chargers at the NFL level, but with the NFL season starting next week, the college football season starts this weekend. It unofficially started over the past weekend. We had that doubling game between Iowa State and Kansas State. So, I mean, it's just like, yeah, we do have some college football action that has already happened, but the full slate with most of the schools playing in week one is happening this weekend. So they got you covered when it comes to the Bruins and the Trojans with some pregame information and, post-game information and leading up to the game itself. They're giving you a lot of great content when it comes to the Bruins, the Trojans, the Rams, and the Chargers, all four LA football teams. They got you covered on all of them. But it's not just football anymore. They got you covered when it comes to the final stretch of the regular season for the MLB season. So they got you covered with the Dodgers and the Angels there. And of course, the postseason and off-season stuff. We just had the schedule release. So we probably got an article up there about what to sort of look for and just some matchups that we like there from the season. So I got you covered with the Angels and the Dodgers, the MLB season. And of course, we're not too far away from the NBA season starting. We're about maybe a month and a half or so, month and some change with the NBA season starting. So they got you covered with Clippers and Lakers preseason coverage leading up to the actual regular season and all the coverage that'll happen all season long. So I got you covered with all big three sports leagues, all centered around LA. Lots of great content coming from a lot of great content producers. Big shout out to our good friend of the show, Thaddeus Klein and Chauncey Talese of LA Podfidential, giving you a lot of great content with all those LA sports teams and some pop culture news as well, talking about movies and TV shows and wrestling. And I mean, just anything and everything in between that sort of tickles their fancy. They're talking about it. They do it in a humorous way. I made an appearance on their podcast last week talking about fantasy football stuff. So tune in and check that out. They have great fun on that podcast. I always love doing their podcast. Great friends of the show. Really appreciate them. But guys, to everybody who's already tuning into our podcast and supporting us by, interacting with us on social media, dropping some YouTube comments, giving us some good ratings, of course, listening to the podcast, watching our videos, and interacting with social media. I mean, just anything and everything that you're doing to support the podcast. We really can't thank you enough.